similar unimpeded relation, via the Anticana. I would have you remember, that the will aspect, is the final dominating principle. In the group application of these ideas the same basic, and profound development must take place, and a group of disciples must be distinguished by pure reason, which will steadily supersede motive, merging eventually into the will aspect of the monad, its major aspect. It is, technically speaking, Shambhala in direct relation with humanity. What, therefore, is the group will in any ashram or master's group? Is it present in any form vital enough to condition the group relations and to unite its members into a band of brothers moving forward into the light? Is the spiritual will of the individual personalities of such strength, that it negates the personality relation and leads to spiritual recognition, spiritual interplay and spiritual relation? It is only in consideration of these fundamental effects of standing as a group in the head's clear light, that it is permissible for disciples to bring into the picture personal sensitivities and thought, and this only because of a group temporary limitation. What is it, therefore, which prevents a disciple as an individual from having direct approach and direct contact with the master without being dependent upon an intermediary? Let me illustrate. In the group I have under training, discipleship in the New Age, vows. I and I, 2 or 3 have direct approach and others have it but know it not. Still others are well-intentioned and hard-driving disciples, but never for a second do they forget themselves. One has had a problem of glamour, but now is preoccupied with the problem of spiritual ambition, a spiritual ambition which is working through a very small personality. Some could make rapid progress, but are too prone to inertia. Perhaps I could say that they do not care enough. Each of them, and every other disciple, can place himself. All of them desire to move forward, and possess a strong inner spiritual life, hence my finding the time to work with them. But the group Anticana is still incomplete, and the aspect of pure reason, and of the heart does not control. The evocative power of the spiritual triad is not, therefore, adequate to hold the personality steady, and the invocative power of the personality is non-existent speaking from the angle of the group personalities which make up the personality aspect of the ashram. This is a factor with which they oft feel I have not to deal. It can only become a potent factor if certain personality relations are adjusted, and inertia is overcome. Then and only then can the group stand. 2. The burning ground has done its work. Here there is quite apt to be misunderstanding. To most people the burning ground stands for one of 2 things. A. Either the fire of the mind, burning up those things in the lower nature of which it becomes increasingly aware. B. Or the burning ground of sorrow, agony, horror, and pain, which is the characteristic quality of life in the 3 worlds, particularly at this time. But the burning ground, referred to here, is something very different. When the blazing light of the sun is correctly focused on, or through a glass, it can cause ignition. When the blazing light of the monad is focused directly upon the personality, via the Anticana, and not specifically through the soul, it produces a blazing fire, which burns up all hindrances in a steady, sequential process. Wording it otherwise, when the will aspect streams from the monad, and focuses through the personal will, as the mind can grasp and realize it, it destroys as by fire all elements of self-will. As the energy of Shambhala streams out and makes a direct contact with humanity, omitting the transmission via the hierarchy, which has hitherto been customary, you have what has been seen in the world today, a destructive conflagration or a world burning ground. When the Anticana of a group is rightly constructed, then the individualized group will disappear in the full consciousness of the monadic purpose or clear directed will. These are points which the disciple preparing for initiation has to consider as he prepares for the higher initiations, and these are the points which any group or ashram in preparation for initiation has also to consider. The secret of the higher initiations lies in the trained use of the higher will. It does not lie in purification or in self-discipline or in any of the expedients which have acted in the past as interceptors of the truth. This whole problem of the shambolic will is in process of revelation, and will eventually alter the entire approach of the disciple in the new age to initiation. The theme of the way into Shambhala requires reflective study and esoteric understanding. In this concept of the new and future section, if I may so call it, of the way or path with which the modern disciple is faced lies the secret of the coming revelation and of the spiritual dispensation which will emerge as humanity constructs the new world civilization and begins to formulate the new culture. The burning, purifying, destructive effects of the monadic will upon its distorted reflection, the individual will, deeply deserves consideration. For long, aspirants have noted and have been taught the effect of the will upon the astral, or emotional body. It is one of the primary and most elementary of the initial tensions, and is taught upon the probationary path. It leads to the purifying, and the reorganizing of the entire psychic and emotional life, as the result of its destructive action. If you will only think, if you will only use a little will, and, if you will only remember that you have a mind, we say to the children of the race and to beginners upon the path of conscious return. Little by little, then, the focus and the orientation shift out of the astral life, and from the emotional level of consciousness into the mental, and consequently into the reflection of the world of purpose, found in the three worlds. When that stage has been somewhat developed, then there follows, upon the path of discipleship, and of preparation for initiation, an effort to grasp and understand the higher aspects of this mental process, and the will aspect of the egoic life begins to influence the disciple. The petals of sacrifice unfold, and the sacred sacrificial aspect of life is revealed in its beauty, purity, simplicity, and in its revolutionizing quality. Upon the path of initiation, the monadic will, of which the egoic will is the reflection, and the individual self-will is the distortion, is gradually transmitted, via the antakana, direct to the man upon the physical plane. This produces the higher correspondence of those qualities so glibly spoken of by the well-trained, but dense esotericis transmutation, and transformation. The result is the assimilation of the individual will and the egoic will into the purpose of the monad, which is the purpose undeviating and unalterable of the one in whom we live, and move and have our being. This is the field of the true burning, for our God is a consuming fire. This is the burning bush, or the burning tree of life of biblical symbolism. This highest of all the fires, this deeply spiritual, and hitherto seldom recognized burning ground, has its effects summed up for us in the next phrase or sentence of Rule I. 3. The clear cold light shines forth, and cold it is, and yet the heat evoked by the group love permits the warmth of energetic moving out. In these words you have the key to group initiation. The light of the higher initiations can stream in when it is evoked by the group love. That light is clear and cold, but produces the needed heat, which is a symbolic word used in many of the world scriptures, to express living, spiritual energy. I said, spiritual energy, and not soul force, and herein lies a distinction which you will someday have to grasp. This group love is based upon the egoic aspect of the will, to which we give the name, sacrificial love. This does not connote happy relationships between individual members of the group. It might, presumably, lead to unhappy outer, superficial interplay, but basically it leads to an unalterably staunch loyalty, underlying the surface of the outer life. The Master's influence, as he seeks to aid his disciple, always produces transitory turmoil, transitory from the angle of the soul, but frequently appalling from the angle of the personality. Similarly, the projection of the life, and influence of any senior disciple into the periphery, or aura of the aspirant, or lesser disciple is in its degree likewise disturbing, and upsetting. This is a point which should be carefully borne in mind, both as regards the disciple's own reactions, and training, and as regards any effect which he may call forth in the life of a probationary disciple or lesser disciple in his own sphere of influence. These intrusive influences, and their consequent effects which are produced upon an individual or a group by a master or a senior disciple are usually interpreted in personality terms, and are very little understood. They are nevertheless aspects of the higher will in some higher disciple and are beating upon the personality will and evoking the sacrificial will of the ego, and hence lead to a period of temporary discomfort. This the aspirant and the inexperienced disciple resent, and blame the evoking sources for their discomfort, instead of learning the needed lesson of receiving and handling force. Where, however, real love exists, it will produce the lessening of the personality will, the evocation of the sacrificial egoic will, and a constantly growing capacity to identify the group with the will, or purpose of the monad. The progress of the group is, therefore, from one burning ground to another, each burning ground being colder and clearer than the preceding one, but producing sequentially the burning fire, the clear cold lighted fire, and the consuming divine fire. Thus in parables the truth goes out, and gradually the initiate grasps the uses of heat, warmth, light and energy. He arrives at an understanding of self-will, sacrificial will and shambolic purpose, and only love, self-love, group love, and finally, divine love, can reveal the significance of these symbolic words and the occult paradoxes which confront the true aspirant as he attempts to tread the way. As we continue our studies of the rules, to be followed by those receiving initiate training, I would remind you of certain things, some of them already touched upon but requiring re-emphasis. Any usefulness which these rules may have for you will be dependent upon your grasping a few basic ideas and then proceeding to make them factual, as far as in you lies. First, I would call your attention to what should be the basic attitude of the would-be initiate. It should be one of purpose, governed by pure reason and working out in spiritual activity. That is a sentence easily written, but what specifically does it convey to you? Let me enlarge upon it somewhat. The attitude of the initiate in training should be one of right spiritual motive, the motive being the intelligent fulfillment of the will aspect of divinity, or of the monad. This involves the merging of his personality self-will into that of the sacrificial will of the soul. And this, when accomplished, will lead to the revelation of the divine will. Of this will, no one who is not an initiate has any conception. It means, secondly, the release of the faculty of spiritual perception and of intuitive understanding, which involves the negation of the activity of the lower, or concrete mind, of the lower personal self, and the subordination of the knowledge aspect of the soul to the clear pure light of the divine understanding. When these two factors are beginning to be active, you will have the emergence of true spiritual activity upon the physical plane, motivated from the high source of the monad, and implemented by the pure reason of the intuition. It will be apparent to you, therefore, that these higher spiritual faculties can only be brought into